Got it.
Okay, welcome everybody to the January Dover Trails and Recreation Committee meeting. I will call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. We will start with public comments. I have one, but I will check elsewhere first. Any public comments? Tommy.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I just wanted to mention very quickly, I did not see a follow-up story in the Deerfield Valley News, but I may have missed it. So if anybody had followed the story about, an implication that the Southern Vermont Trails Association misappropriated, stole, whatever language you want to use, a excavator for their own use that the town had paid for the stump jumpers, that was cleared up at the last select board meeting. Certainly wasn't the case. And I was never contacted or anyone in my organization. So, certainly could have been cleared up with a phone call, but as I said, I just wanted to, if anyone was following along on that story, I just wanted to give an update on that. Thank you, Eric.
Yep, thanks, Tommy. Any other public comments? Patricia.
Oh, I guess I shouldn't respond to that for a public comment. I thought I saw something in the paper last week.
Maybe. Okay, any other public comments? Okay, so my public comment. The Dover, the Conservation Commission, which oversees the Dover Town Forest, is seeking an additional member. Letters of interest to join the Conservation Commission can be submitted directly to Assistant Clerk Jeanette Eckert at the town office. I don't have a deadline on that. I don't remember seeing it, but if it's something you're interested in doing, just reach out to me and I'll get a deadline for you and get you in touch with Jeanette. Tommy.
The Conservation Commission is on the agenda, so we could hold all questions there, but a direct follow-up to that is, are they just seeking one more to make a committee of 3? And these are questions we could, as I said then, but unless you want to talk about it now.
I don't.
Okay.
We'll keep that. I know that there is one seat currently open that they're trying to fill. So I don't. And we can do that. That can be one of the questions that we formulate later on in that agenda item. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I just know that it was asked of me to present to the group that there is a seat open on the Conservation Commission. And if it is something you are interested in, to submit that letter of interest to Jeanette Eckert at the town office. Okay. All right. Any other public comments? Okay. I have no additions or changes to the agenda. Any in the group? Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the December 13th meeting. Can I get a motion? Patricia makes a motion. Julia seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
I'll probably abstain.
Okay.
Since I wasn't there.
Thank you. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. There you go. And I think does that cover it, Shannon? Awesome. Great work. Moving right along. February meeting date. So right now our meeting is scheduled to fall on Valentine's Day. So I'm thinking it might be a good idea for us to potentially move that meeting, just because I know that people have plans around that particular holiday. I think the tentative date, Shannon, was it the 15th we looked at as the tentative date, the Wednesday after? Yes, it was.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Totally fine. So wondering if people would be available to move the February Trails and Rec meeting to the Wednesday after the regular date, which would be the 15th. It's Wednesday, the 15th of February. Is that something that works for everybody? I'm getting lots of thumbs up. Kristen? Yes, yeah, that's fine. Tommy? Great. And David? Great. Matt?
does not work for me.
Okay. Okay, let's see, we would still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus Sarah and David. Okay.
Sure.
Matt, are you okay with maybe missing that one if we run it that day?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure the our alternate can make it.
Okay, yeah, we'll catch you up. And you can, anybody you're sending as the alternate, just again, make sure we have advance notice of that, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. So we will go ahead and move that February meeting to Wednesday, the 15th, okay? Perfect. The town forest dedication update. So we already talked about how that all went in October. But there is an agenda item. Well, there was supposed to be an agenda item going in front of the board Tuesday. We finally got some bids to mount the plaque to the actual rock, which was actually quite a lot more than anyone was expecting, but it's something that we are going to do as part of the dedication. So you should see that come in front of the select board, if not this Tuesday, the following one. We'll finalize those bids and get that taken care of, and you'll see Phil's plaque mounted to the rock up there at the town forest. Okay, any questions on that?
Eric, I have a question.
Mike?
Everything that's done in the town forest, is that being pre-approved by the Conservation Committee?
So anything, yeah, I would, everything needs to go through the Conservation Commission when it comes to the town forest.
So how is that process taking place?
Well, that's not a discussion for us to have, right? Because I don't have the answer. I'm not the Conservation Commission. I'm the Trails and Rec Committee, and the Economic Development Department. If you have questions about the Conservation Commission, you need to ask the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Tommy.
Again, we are going to talk about this, but as a body, as a committee that donates our time in the purpose of promoting trails and recreation for our town and community, we certainly can collectively have questions that we can present so that we as a body then have answers together, correct?
Absolutely. And that's what that agenda item is coming up. But like you and I discussed the other day, I don't have the answers. And
Wouldn't expect you to. Wouldn't expect you to.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So if that's a question that we as a group want to present to the Conservation Commission or the Select Board, we absolutely can do that. So that we can discuss when we get to the agenda item concerning questions about the Conservation Commission. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the plaque mounting on the rock at the town forest? Disc golf RFP update. So that went back out shortly after we decided on trails. It's been out for about a month. Well, yeah, a month at this point. RFPs close Friday on that. We'll move pretty quickly to score those using the rubric for the RFP, and we will get a recommendation to the select board ASAP on that to line them up with our trails company and get design and implementation moving forward so that we can get hopping on that. First thing here this spring, summer. But I just want to give you the update that RFP is closing on the 13th, and you should see some motion on that pretty quickly afterwards. Any questions on that?
Quick question. So that RFP is separate from the Horace Hill Trails RFP?
Yep, they were both released separately the first time. It's just that we didn't receive any proposals the first time around that met what we were looking for in terms of standard of the project. So we decided to re-release, the select board agreed to re-release the RFP for an additional month. We've already received more. Last time we got 2, we already have 3 in this time. So.
And can you just update me on how much we're spending on the RFP just on the trails portion of Horace Hill? Or is that not public information yet? No,
it's public information. The estimate, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to send that out to the group. It's in the select board meeting from when it was approved. So it is public information. I just don't have that number sitting right in front of me at the moment. So I will follow up with the group. I will send out an email with that amount. Does that work for you, Mike?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't keep them all right on the side there. So Patricia.
do we get to chime in on the decision, or is that?
This
select
one, we
board thing?
like, because we already put the RFP out, we just, and we've been scoring them that way. That's all going right through our office there.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions on that? Tommy?
Just that good question Patricia had, just to piggyback off that a little bit. What was there a precedent in the past that one of the kind of roles of this committee was to be involved in decisions like that? I'm not challenging. I'm just curious. Just want to make sure that.
No, that hadn't been the precedent. When we're talking about those types of projects, I mean, we've done a number of these RFPs, most notably the RFP for, say, the town website and things like that. That's a situation where we put out the RFP, the select board approves it, and then we score and make a recommendation, to the select board. We give them typically the top three, responses we'll give to the board, and then they're the ones who make that final decision.
Was the Weston and Sampson, were we involved in?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's kind of the precedent that I'm referring to.
Okay, that was before my time, so
Okay.
I guess the way that we've been running our RFPs, that's how we've been doing it in-house. If there's questions on that, you can definitely run that by the select board. Any other questions on that? Patricia?
What about Jeremy? Seemed to be like a big part of that process, and because he knows so much about disc golf, or was so involved. I don't know if I formulated a question really.
No, so I mean, we had Jeremy give us recommendations on people that the RFP should be sent to. So we definitely took those and have sent those to those people. Jeremy actually reached out to one and just to let them know that RFP was open. But I mean, it's, again, in terms of scoring and the recommendation and supplying those responses to the select board, that's going to go through our office.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Tommy?
Could we, as a group, I don't know if we have to vote on it, but could that be one of the questions we do pose to the select board? I think it's an important question.
Okay.
I don't know if that needs a vote, or we can
No,
just.
you can come and ask questions to the select board anytime you'd like. I mean, that's.
But it's different when we as a committee ask a question than if Tom Oakley or Mike Purcell or Patricia Sweeney, Kristen Mumford, Mike Garber, Julia LaGrange. You know what I mean? So my question is, can we leave this meeting with questions that are then brought, I would think, from you or Shannon to the board on behalf of this committee?
Yeah, no, they would come from me to the board or to the Conservation Commission. That's my role as Director of Economic Development. So I would absolutely present those.
Terrific.
Yeah, that's what's that?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so is there, I mean, we don't have an agenda. Is that one question that you'd like me to bring to the board? Okay, so it's not on this upcoming agenda. I can absolutely put it on the next. Does that make sense? Or is it something, I can't add it to the agenda. Oh, no, it is on I can put it on the upcoming agenda. I will do that. Okay. That will go. Mike Purcell.
Yeah, we did have quite the comment on, the board were decision makers when we chose the Sampson people to do the study. And I believe that we should be able to comment on various RFPs. Like, for example, when I asked, was that loop, concept included in the RFP for the trails? And it's like, wow, gee, I don't know. I don't think so, but we can, I mean, certain comments we can make when we review these things can get a more complete idea of what we want done. It may be slightly cumbersome, but any one of us may have comments that an RFP should include certain items. I think that's a valid agenda item for the future.
Okay. I do see that Sarah is here now. Sarah, just to fill you in on the conversation, there is some questions about the process of our office releasing and then, you know, scoring and making recommendations on RFPs for the projects on Horace Hill. So that will be an agenda item at our next meeting.
Okay.
Select board meeting where that question will be asked. Any other questions there? Tommy, the Ridge project update.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I gave the same update at the last select board meeting, and we had provided a first draft RFP to the United States Forest Service, who had corrections or comments. Worked together with them to complete a second draft and final draft. I'm just looking through my notes here, are going to go live in March with that RFP. We think it's very important that everyone who responds to that RFP actually comes out and sees the land. Or, you know, don't know how they would really be able to provide a legitimate or, you know, accurate scope of work without doing that. So we're going to keep that open till July to give them, you know, enough people the chance to go out there and see if, you know, they really are interested in that project. And, you know, then from there, it's really going to be, you know, the timeline's really going to be around the United States Forest Service and when they can have their specialists come out, you know, and that's a big question mark. They have a lot of other pressing projects out of this district, but, you know, we're going to hopefully make that happen as soon as possible. Coinciding with this project, there's another statewide project going on. I know Mike Purcell is familiar with, called the VIII Trail. Okay. And, I'll just give a quick explanation just in case people have not heard about it, but the VIII Trail would be the third state Massachusetts to Canadian recreational trail. Okay, right. We have the Catamount Trail for cross-country skiing, the Long Trail for hiking. This would be a mountain biking trail the whole length of the state. And the United States Forest Service was out with some local trail stewards, and again, Mike, I know you were there, because they are looking at the ridge proper. Okay, that's the top of the ridge, which we've called phase 3 in part of this project, as a really good connection for that trail. And I think it could be great for us, great for the town, because attached to this initiative is some serious federal funding coming from the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as United States Forest Service, to the tune of about $203 million. Don't quote me, but I believe that just was raised closer to 4. And that was going to be a very expensive part of this project, although I think Mike had some ideas how we could do it cheaper. But I mean, if that was done under that project, and the money, you know, to work around that bog, whatever they decided, whether it was bridges, I'm not sure, it could really be a tremendous asset. And maybe that'll even put a little bit more eyes on the project that's near and dear to our hearts, which is the Ridge Trail. So anyway, that's an update. And if anyone ever has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Julia.
Ooh. Just a quick question, Tom. Do I understand correctly that there's a draft RFP that you've worked out with the U.S. Forest Service, and when you say go live with it, that means you're going to release it for bid in March, and it's going to be a 3-month, 4-month bid process for the trail design and construction. And then once that's completed and you've selected that, then the U.S. Forest Service has to validate it with their ecological expert.
Correct. And
Yes, okay.
exactly. And I don't know if anyone's kind of seeing where that could get tricky, but here's where it could get tricky. We choose a contractor that then's beholden to the timeline of when the specialists can come out. We'll cross that bridge when it comes, but you know, it's certainly that's kind of on the back of my mind on it might be a little bit of a puzzle, but again, we'll cross that when it comes. But yeah, Julia, that's essentially where we're at.
Julia.
One more follow-up. And Tom, how many do you expect? And if you get, you know, a number before July, does that mean that you'll proceed before that?
No, we wouldn't proceed before that. We would keep to the, you know, to the timeline that that we stated. And your guess is as good as mine on how many.
Okay.
You know, I would certainly hope more than 3, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tommy? Okay, thanks, Tommy. Mike Purcell, Ridge Trail proper update.
I thought there was another item in between, no?
Eric,
Oh,
you skipped-
Valley Trail minus, sorry. Sarah and I met with our contact at Vermont DOT. This was a few weeks ago. And just had a discussion about what our options are moving forward with the Valley Trail A- portion that we've talked so much about. I'm in the process of reaching out to get updated pricing on what that project would actually cost us. And I think, you know, once we kind of get some of that information in, it'll help us to make a decision which direction to go with the project. So keep an eye out if it's something you're interested in talking about. That item will come back in front of the select board here at some point. Any questions on what I just said? Patricia.
Sorry, trying to unmute. Didn't the property sell? And so does that just sends it into like a whole quandary?
Yeah, that's a part of the conversation. So just as an update, I mean, we've been in a chicken and egg scenario here, regardless of whether or not the property sold, and that's that we need new engineering, but we don't want to pay to get that new engineering without the easement signed. But we can't get the engineering. I mean, we can't get the easement signed without the engineering. So we're just it's a chicken and egg scenario, and we're working through our options to figure that out. Sarah, you had your hand raised.
I was just going to say the fact that Tollgate sold wasn't really because we don't actually have an easement on Tollgate. The idea is since that's no longer commercial, but it's the intention anyway is that it be residential. The served areas are changing, right? If it was serving businesses, that's a different approach than if it's serving private residences. And this is a very expensive project because of the separate bridge that has to be built. There's a separate pedestrian bridge. And then we're still across the street from you. So then we're saying if people want to get to your business off the Valley Trail, they then have to cross Route 100 a second time. In not really the greatest place to be crossing Route 100, either of those positions. So it's, you know, there's a lot of things in the mix with that. And so we're looking at the like Eric said, the engineering, the cost. What would it cost us to just back out? Because we would have to pay back the money we've already invested. So it's, I think we're okay. We're actually not in horrible shape with the property owners whose land is being crossed. It's just, it's all these other things now that it's been so long that, like Eric said, we have to redo the engineering.
Thank you, Sarah. Mike.
I would just, when your comment about serving only residential properties rather than a business, I would hesitate to not let that be a barrier If anything, that trail should continue all the way to Dover Green or the other condos, because then it raises the value of all those properties and actually provides users, for the Valley Trail to get to businesses. So, I just hesitate to say, well, just because that'll be residential versus business, it shouldn't necessarily be the final terminus for that extension.
So I think, Sarah, hold on one second. I think what we were getting at though is the amount of the project that we would end up paying to serve like that we're paying doesn't get all the way down to Dover Green, right?
No, I
That's-
gathered that, but you need
close.
that to get to Dover Green, chicken or the egg, just like you are with everything else.
Right. So
You get more-
it's a
you get more
decision-
value,
Right.
once you get across the damn water.
Right. And it's a decision that'll be based on,
Yep.
what's the greatest effect that we can have by spending money and that's
Right.
something we're constantly.
But if the plan is to connect residential places with business,
Yep,
um,
I totally get it.
know.
Sarah Shippey.
The calculus on business versus residential is also carried on at the state level. It's not just up to us.
Yeah.
And it's 90% their money.
right, I'm just saying,
No,
The-
Mike, I get what you're saying, but what I'm
Okay,
saying is it
okay,
wasn't
okay.
Eric and I who made that call.
no, I gotcha. It's just, that report is,
Patricia.
I just wanted to say I wasn't even asking in regard to my business. I know that Tollgate sold, so I just was throwing that in the mix.
Gotcha. Sarah.
And Patricia, I know you weren't asking that question, but certainly your business should be, to bring the trail right across the road from you and then go, if we've gone that far.
Yeah, well, I thought,
But I know you
all-
weren't
all
asking
the
that.
way up to the bar that's up there, and past the,
Right.
thrift store,
Yeah,
I thought it could connect all of that, like
It also gets
almost all the way up to
challenging
the
with-
Austrian house.
The amount of engineering that would have to happen to level ground to create a valid trail in some of those, if you drive along slowly and look at what is over there,
Yeah,
that's going to be a tremendously expensive project. And yes, it would be great if we had a trail that went all the way down to the center of Wilmington, right? Like ideally, but when you look at the geography of what we're fighting against, that's another factor. Because the state's only going to give us so much money.
Mike Purcell.
well, if you can get to the corner, the sawmill people, have a landing there, and even an area that's suitable for parking, because that's where they did the logging and that's where the road cut is. And then from that zone, it's possible to take advantage of the various roads that go through Dover Green and so forth. I'm just saying, you don't,
But okay,
necessarily
so
have to
I'm gonna
make it.
stop you right here because
Yep.
we're getting into the
Yep,
public.
No, I know.
private. Okay.
Yep.
We're getting into the public-private partnership conversation, which has already been a thing recently that we've had some issues figuring out, right? So until we have information about how that fits together and how we make those work, then we can't assume that we can do anything.
No, I get that, but there are public
Right.
roads you can get
Yeah,
to.
I appreciate
right.
that. Yep. Okay. Any other questions on Valley Trail A-? Okay, now Ridge Trail proper update from Mike Purcell.
Yeah, right. Here we go. I've been after getting this trail improved for both Dover and Wilmington and Bytown in terms of just taking advantage of what the Forest Service determined was still a valid trail, because there was a moment before they did the Somerset IRPs where they were considering which trails they wanted to leave open or close. And the last ranger decided, as a result of the tour with the backcountry skiing and the Ridge Trail, that it was a valid, important trail, and that it met all the criteria that was required for them to consider it valid. At that point, they said, we could do work on it, assuming that providing that we met their criteria, which meant recognize groups like my club or somebody that was a VIMBA club, and or, you know, as it turns out, you know, the Catamount Trail people. So, you know, we got approval to work on it, you know, improve the tread and so forth. What we did was also we created sort of a bypass of that swamp that was temporary in nature, to the point where, you know, I would be quick to say it was not handlebar width. The Forest Service people were going to send soils people and biologists and everybody to come out there, but then before anything else was done, but then COVID hit, so nothing happened. As a result of our, you know, report and increased demand for recreational resources, the new ranger and the new recreation specialist needed to come out and see these problem areas on the ridge. So I kept after them for a long time, and we actually scheduled an appointment, and so a site visit. So we met at Chimney Hill at the other end of the ridge trail, kind of, drove back around, drove up to the top of the mountain, and people that came along included I call them the hut people, because along this end, as well as a Velomont, you know, representative and one of their trail scouts, because the hut people are trying to establish a number of huts along this Velomont route that goes from Canada to the Mass border. I met with the Velomont people a long time ago and said there are routes to get from Stratton, Arlington down, you know, to the Mass border, but they're Forest Service Jeep trails or double track or forest roads. And it's not necessarily what the Velomont would like to have. They'd like to have sort of single track. But again, just, you know, establishing those things in the forest is pretty time consuming. So you have some stuff already. The SOVT people are now more involved with the Velomont people. So rather than take advantage of some obvious routes, they're planning with the Velomont people to come up over towards the north end of Mount Snow towards the Stratton border. So they would come up over the Upper Handle Road, past kind of their new trail network. Their plan would be to go from there over to the base of Mount Snow and climb the mountain and use the ridge trail. It sort of confounds me, but you know, I have different recommendations, but regardless, they came to scope out that route. So we went to the ridge trail, and believe it or not, if anybody's been there, the swamp is usually covered with 1 foot, 2 feet of water, because it was so dry. There was no water in the swamp. It was like crazy. I mean, you still couldn't walk across it, but it was like you could see the moss instead of being underwater. To which we used the bypass, the temporary bypass, and the Forest Service was flipped out. They said, well, what do you mean there's a bypass? You know, how did this bypass get here? And I said, well, we put it in. What do you mean you put it in? And I said, well, the Forest Service guys said we could put this in, you know, because you can't go through the swamp. And, you know, I said, you know, we haven't been here since before COVID because you guys are going to come out and look at it and so forth. Well, they're pretty upset about it, you know, and I said, no, the people were regular, you know, partners. Any chainsaw work we did were from people that were belonged to the or satisfied the U.S. Forest Service chainsaw requirements. And so, because I've been trying to propose a floating bridge like they do in wetlands all around the country. So as we continued south, some of the tread that I would have, you know, recommended, we just have the VIII harden, they were saying we should really, well, the bikers, should modify some of those routes so they're not up and down the fall line and so forth. So they started recognizing that there were a bunch of considerations that bikers would need to satisfy the new sustainable trail approach. Like a lot of events that you may have done that were grueling, or places you went and you seem to think, oh, it was only a mile long. Well, when you get to Haystack, it's not that close to Chimney Hill. And there's a bunch of challenges from between Haystack and Chimney Hill, and swamps and things that, need work if you're going to talk about bicycles or mountain bikes. And then on the other side, the Velomont people want to create a new route that gets down over to Route 9 closer to Medburyville versus like I have a Catamount Trail extension that I'm working on with them at the southern end of Wilmington. Ultimately, when you talk to the Forest Service people, I said, well, what do you think, what's your favorite deal with solution to the swamp? And they said, we like your bypass. So they're going to come out and look at the bypass rather than build a bridge or do any of those other things. The Velomont huts and biker groups were quick to point out or refer to all this federal money that was out there, kind of a la Jim Barnes, to my way of thinking. But I explained that, this ridge trail, so that people can use it for the communities, is so important as a resource before they consider biking or what have you. So, the two towns should consider, making this more passable before they start needing tons of money to have machines build switchbacks and bike routes and so forth. I have yet to find out, what plans they have to get back out there to look at that bypass. But clearly folks are using it, and the trail counters before had as many people going from Chimney Hill to Haystack as used the whole $1 million mile. So it's clearly a resource that we should embrace. It's part of my little happy, winter race. It could be summer races and so forth, but at least the ranger and the recreation specialists are aware of the ridge trail that they've said we could work on. And that's about it right now. Personally, I think, the Velomont should come over, Stratton or Somerset Road, come to Dover, run the Valley Trail. They can go back up Horace Hill to get back across to the Valley Trail, go south to Wilmington, so they can hit all these businesses and so forth. And then back to the Catamount Trail versus or down around the Chimney Hill area. But that's my personal belief. And the Vimba guy at the top said, yeah, it'd be great to have a couple of different routes or loops that, the diehards will want to take advantage of.
Gotcha. Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for the update. Tommy, you're next. Patricia, go ahead.
So this includes e-bikes, right?
No,
And what
no.
class?
Not the
Just
Forest Service has
mountain bikes.
policies against e-bikes.
Okay,
They put them, they can include e-bikes as motorized. And so that's on all of their land. Anywhere else, most places around the state don't seem to be having issues with them or prohibit them, but the feds have anti-policy on e-bikes.
Gotcha. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Patricia. Tommy, go ahead.
Important conversation, and I agree with what a lot of Mike's saying. and I think maybe we should have a follow-up with some hard data and facts. I am not intimately involved in this, Mike, but yes, SOVTA is taking a role with this VIII Trail through VEMBA. And I believe, like, okay, and again, let's table this back with some data and facts. The reason why we can't do what Mike is proposing, which I think would be so much better to have the trail coming closer to towns and businesses, is because almost what we were talking about earlier, you know, Sarah, with Sarah and Eric's issue, it's with the landowner agreements, and there'd be so much private land that we would have to get agreements and easements for. Again, Mike, I could be wrong, but I have heard that conversation, that there was a determination that to make this link, it's going to be so much easier to do it, and, you know, not having to go through and getting agreements from multiple private landowners. But the facts are out there. So I would certainly be happy to present,
Sure.
you know, some kind of report in the next meeting on the different conversations and why the determination is now being made that would be the best route.
Kristen,
Just a quick point of clarification, Mike, because I'm not sure I completely understand. The bike trails would be separate from the current hiking trails as they're talking about going through Chimney Hill and up over Haystack. My only concern there is they're pretty narrow, that you would have that kind of traffic.
I don't believe they're not talking about making them separate. They're trying to make them sort of multi-use. It's just there are some considerations as they consider part of that for biking that they would like to see addressed, you know, and some of that has to do with their own Forest Service standards rather than the ability of the bikers to negotiate or navigate, you know, rough terrain.
Okay, my only comment to that is I went up to Chimney Hill on a holiday weekend, and there must have been over 30 cars along that road, Binnybrook,
Oh yeah,
to get to the trail. So it's just more of a safety
Well,
concern than anything else.
their plan would be to break off of that trail before you actually sort of descend down towards that parking area. Right at the, I don't want to call it the crest, but there's an obvious part where when you're climbing up from Chimney Hill, you've made it to this fairly broad plateau before the final assault, and they plan on dropping off there and creating something that goes over towards Medburyville versus, you know, like I said, I mean we've ridden it, you know, and it's pretty freaking rugged, let me tell you. That's why, you know, in my mind I would have said, you know, send them on the Valley Trail where it's, you know, public, you know, and come around, because the Chimney Hill people, like on my extension and the Catamount thing, they're on board. The Valley Trail, the Forest Service is on board at the south end, but they want to go to a different spot and break off in a different location. So that's not my gig. I'm not sort of running the show on that one.
No, thanks for clarifying that. That's helpful.
okay. Any other quick questions for Mike? Awesome. Thank you again, Mike, for coming to talk to us and giving us that update. Okay.
Yeah, just a quick one. While I haven't been up there since before COVID, people are using the darn thing pretty good.
Yep.
You know, it was a pretty beaten path on this bypass that we put in. Additionally, they do talk, there are a couple of approved areas for lookouts that would be on the west side of the trail, that so people when hiking would be able to go out and see all of the wilderness and stuff like that. So from a town perspective, whether they walk from the bottom or ride the chair, or like other people have said, they want to go from Chimney Hill over to Mount Snow for lunch along the Ridge Trail and go back. It's a pretty important resource, whether it's approved for biking or not, you know.
Perfect. Thank you again, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move into our final agenda item very quickly. First, I just want to make sure that I have the question that I'm framing for the select board on Tuesday correct, because I don't want there to be any question about the way it was asked or presented to them. So
Eric, you're skipping one again.
am I? Always. Okay. Project funding guidelines. So, the question came up, we gave some money out to complete a project that was of for $10,000 basically. And the question was asked of us, hey, all of these other departments in town are held to the standard where everything over a certain dollar amount goes out to RFP. So it was asked that we look into, the process for us handing out money for projects and things like that. So just know that we are in the process of looking at what that looks like for our department and what that looks like for implementing projects, trails, or otherwise. So just know that that's coming through. It's something that, obviously will be a public meeting and everybody will have a chance to provide some input on. Okay. Any questions on that? Perfect. Okay. Now, moving into the conversation about Conservation Commission. So the question, Tommy and Mike and I think it was Patricia. So the way you'd like me to ask the select board is based on the precedent that was set when making the selection of Weston and Sampson. What's the process for us receiving and scoring in RFPs and making recommendations to the select board? Is that correct, Tommy?
Yeah, well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would say yes. Tied into, what is really the purpose and responsibility of this committee? We're all given our time once a month to this committee. And is that something that, we should be involved in?
Okay. Excuse me, I'm just making sure that I write that down. Okay. 1 second here. Okay. All right. So I have that question written down. I will put that in front of the select board this upcoming Tuesday. Okay. So that'll be on the agenda for the upcoming meeting. Let me just make sure I give you the date on the 17th, Tuesday, the 17th in front of the select board. Okay. All right. So the final item is that we were going to draft some questions about the Conservation Commission and its role as far as it pertains to the town forest. So just to be clear, those questions, we're only framing questions now. I don't have the answer to the questions, and we don't have a representative from the Conservation Commission here to answer those questions. So we will be framing those questions for us to present to them or the select board. Everybody good with that? Mike.
Simple question. Who's on the Conservation Commission?
Currently-
There were 3, but now there's only 2. Who are they?
It's public. Yeah. So that's public information. Currently there it's Andy McLean and Chris Cady are the 2 active members of the Conservation Commission. And as I stated during public comments, they are seeking a 3rd.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Tommy.
Yeah, so thank you. I did request putting this agenda item on, and I do have some, a few high level points that I could run through for the committee here. And, this is kind of coming from understanding and listening to the select board and some of their frustration over the past few months, healthy frustration, I'll call it, just over kind of how much time Trails and Rec is starting to take in these meetings, and it's becoming a little bit cumbersome. And at the last one, the chair, Vicky Capitani, even said, does anybody have any ideas? So, I'm taking that to heart a little bit, and I'm trying to do some, historical accounting, forensic accounting, whatever you want to call it, and really just figure out all the parties that are involved. But first we need to understand who they are and what they are. Okay. So, we have a few pieces of property in town, really 2 major ones right now, the Dovertown Forest and Horace Hill. So the Conservation Commission, which, you know, we're going to hopefully figure out, has some authority over Dovertown Forest, yet not Horace Hill. Okay. And, you know, I think that's one of the first questions is, you know, why just the Dovertown Forest? But I'll just kind of run through, you know, my main questions from now. And Mike Garber had a very good one that we should also remember, because that's not one I had. So go right ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So are these questions that I'm presenting to the Conservation Commission?
These are questions I am presenting to this Trails and Rec committee right now. And
Okay.
we can decide if they're important to present, but I would certainly hope so, yes.
Okay,
Okay. So my understanding is from the Vermont state statutes on municipalities having a conservation committee is that at minimum, there needs to be 3, okay, up to 9. So my understanding is that we've had 2 as of March 22. Okay, and that person has not lived in town for even longer. However, we're not seeking an appointment till now. So there has been a pretty big pause there. My second question would be, why are, and this may not be the case, are we only looking for 1 more? So are we looking to have a conservation committee that has authority over the one, you know, probably the most important property in town currently, of only 3 members, opposed to 5, or, you know, up to what the state statute says of 9? Okay. I also was curious, you know, we just kind of had this emergency meeting, or maybe that's not the right term for it, special meeting that I believe they chose to forego. And the Conservation Committee of, you know, Chris Cady and Annie McLean, we're going to make a recommendation and then present that recommendation of the candidates to the select board. And I would ask the question of, is that appropriate, or should the select board be reviewing those candidates? Because would there, you know, possibly be room for error if only 2 people on a committee are looking at who else is going to be on that committee? So that's another question I have. And then I would just say too, there on the Vermont state statutes, there are reporting, you know, there's reporting statutes. Okay. And from what I can see, there's only been 2 meetings warned in the past 2 years, including Friday's special meeting. And SOVTA has been involved for 5 years. So we've had 5 meetings over 5 years. Okay. And there are no minutes from any meetings posted online or emailed to a mailing list. Meanwhile, you know, the Conservation Commission's opinion is brought up regularly in select board meetings. And I'm just curious as to how that opinion is formed without having meetings. So, you know, just important questions. And really the concern around the reporting is when you have a massive project going on in this piece of property that have been thousands and thousands of hours and, you know, have caused such popularity to grow. I would just hope that the select board is being told exactly what was in that meeting and what the plan is for the year, and that may have been done. I can't find a record of that. So those are my questions to spur some conversation for the group.
okay. Mike first and then Julia.
I just want to say we were faced with the same situation and issues in Marlborough, where, you know, I was on the Conservation Commission before and everybody just vanished. And yet, you know, there are rules and regulations that, you know, and responsibilities that the Conservation Commission is tasked with. And so as a result, you know, they was a desperate search to find enough members, you know, to have a quorum and reach these decisions that even included, you know, ZBA sort of stuff. So it would appear that, you know, I think they're trying to address that, including, have a sufficient members, et cetera. Certainly the select board are all the ones that, review any candidates, but they're not probably limited to those, whatever Andy and Chris recommended. But it's certainly not an unusual situation that this town is trying to remedy, just like they did in the other town, where you've got to have at least 3, and where you go from there, you can do stuff. But areas of responsibility, they should be able to address and explain in a meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's keep it to formulating those questions, not forming an opinion on what they should or should not be able to do.
Nope, exactly.
Julia, go ahead.
Well, my question is really, what's the interplay between this committee and the Conservation Commission? And would there be a conflict of someone from this committee serving on the Conservation Commission as well? I would think so, because if we're recommending trails and recreation activities, one would think that then those that are on the Conservation Commission would want to have an independent view. And again, so a third question I would have is, if the interplay is such that it would not be a conflict, would it be, I don't know, why don't we ever have Conservation Commission folks on that come and attend these meetings and vice versa?
Okay.
Like, what are we how are we supposed to work with them? Or is it everyone funnels through the select board?
Okay. Tommy, can you do me a favor? I know I will call on you because I know you have your hand up. The questions that you had framed initially, can you send those to me? I tried to keep up with my notes, but if you don't mind sending me those.
No problem whatsoever.
Okay. And you had raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said this is about framing the questions of getting more clarification, not necessarily what they can and cannot do. I just wanted to say, I think that though also is part of the question, is what power do they do and do not have? What can they and cannot do? So I do think that's part of the equation. And to Julia's point, I can't imagine how it would be a conflict for one of us to being on it if a town employee can be on that commission, who I believe is the clerk of that commission and the town clerk. We certainly, I don't think they would have any problem with one of us being on that committee. We just haven't heard because it wasn't warned in anything, although it was in the paper.
Okay, so were there any other questions? Because we're a minute off here. Were there any other questions that the group would like framed? And who am I presenting these questions to?
The Concom, they're the ones that can tell you what's tasked. I mean, there's rules and regulations in the town ordinance that says this is what the Conservation Commission has to respond to, what triggers reviews and so forth. So the Concom will be the quickest one to explain that, or a representative from them. Yeah. Invite them to participate, and then they can show what maps and what properties, trigger their review, just like the wildlife guy needs to be contacted in certain zones, when you're going to build a house.
Gotcha. Tommy?
Yeah, I guess a question too is, does the Conservation Committee, is that a body that has been appointed by the select board? So do they serve at the select board's pleasure? Because if that's the case, then I think these would also be questions for the select board. In fact, I would almost say that these would it definitely be questions for the select board, opposed to the Conservation Committee as the overall body.
Yep. I will go ahead and I will share these with both the select board and the Conservation Commission, just so you're like, the one thing that I do know, okay, is that the Conservation Commission was voted on by the residents of the town of Dover and implemented through a townwide vote when it was first constructed. And then members of said committee are appointed by the select board. Those are facts I do have at my disposal.
And then last question was Mike Garber. You had a very good question earlier that we tabled for this. I believe it was simple, but again, it had to do with figuring out this entire process. It might have been, what was the plaque approved by the conservation? Do you remember, Mike, earlier on?
Oh, earlier in this meeting?
Correct.
Yeah, what we're doing something on a rock in the Dovertown forest, and was it approved? Was it not approved? And there was really no response.
By the Conservation Commission. Yep. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Okay, so I have Julia's questions written down. I have Mike's questions written down. Tommy, send me your questions. I will get those in a document and present those to the select board and the Conservation Commission. I don't know what, it's up to the board how they want to address, responding to the questions. So I will let everybody know how that's going to be happening. Okay? Everybody okay with that? Patricia?
Motion to end the meeting.
Oh, wait, one last thing, Eric, before the meeting ends. I just forgot to say that the Stump Jumpers did put out shared usage signs in the trails by Crosstown. So if anybody's seen them or has an issue with them or needs something that they need to say about them, now, next meeting, just give us your opinions.
Mike, thank you very much for taking care of that. That was, I know that was a long conversation, and I appreciate you guys taking the lead on that and getting that done for us. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 15th. Patricia has made a motion to end the meeting. Second, Julia. All right, perfect. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next month.